Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, good morning. Let's begin.
Yeah, good morning.
I'm hearing something else here. Okay. All right, there you go. Hey, good morning. Let's begin. All right. I'm hearing something else here. Okay. All right, there you go. All right. Are you hearing something? Hey, good morning.
I'm hearing the intro going on loop over and over.
Yeah, hold on. Why is that? Let's see. Are you hearing something? Hold on. I'm hearing. Okay, there you go. Sorry. Hi, good morning, Charlie.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. Good morning, everyone in Asia, and good afternoon and good evening, almost everyone in the rest of the world. And I must apologize first that I had to push the podcast date for 2 days this week because I had my wife's green card interview yesterday.
Yes. How's that going?
Yeah, and actually, day before the interview, of course, I had to meet the lawyer, and of course, I always have something missing, and I had to get my document notarized. And let me ask you this: have you ever notarized English documents in Japan?
I have not. No, I'm not a registered notary or anything. So how would you do that in Japan?
Exactly. So you have to go to notary, you're a registered person, right? And that is only available in probably the embassy. Usually that costs a couple bucks in the States, but that costs 5,000 yen in Japan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you go to the U.S., almost every bank branch or most places like that have someone that has a notary license.
Right. Yeah, or UPS and places like that too, you know. But anyway, so I had to go and find so-called 24-hour traveling notary man available in Manhattan, who you call and they'll show up within 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, and that person charged only $45. So it's still cheaper. You know?
That's pretty crazy, yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. But anyway, so let's dive into the first subject.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about, since we just talked about, let's talk about RIZIN 32 additional card. Why Bobby Ologun now? Again, I would say. I mean, you just mentioned there's two American guys in that RIZIN 32 show.
I think there is more than two because there's a couple of base guys. And isn't Bay Noah also on the card?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Bay Noah. All right, okay. But the new one, I think the most draw, of course, for the Japanese fans are Bobby Ologun, who is, like 42 years old? He's pretty old.
He's 55 years old.
Oh, he's 55.
Yes. Remember, he famously got caught lying about his age on official documents. It wasn't like he was on TV saying he was like his official Japanese documents. He was lying about his age.
I'll be honest with you. I do not follow his career, but all I know is like even though he pretend like he doesn't really speak Japanese, makes like a real funny Japanese mistakes, but he's a fluent in Japanese.
Yeah, so
everything is an act, right?
My wife was watching it, and she's not a Bobby Ologun fan. And she was just pissed off. She just got more and more pissed off because he was doing that whole I don't speak Japanese thing. Right. Everybody knows he speaks Japanese. Everyone knows he speaks fluent Japanese. He speaks perfect Japanese.
Right. Everybody knows that too. And the funny thing is, I don't know if the American or non-Japanese fans noticed that or not. But one of the Japanese comedian was at the press conference, asked many questions to Bobby Ologun about, are you going to beat up your opponent like how you beat up your wife? And how much are you getting? And I heard
Sakakibara got pretty upset about that.
And he was supposedly told at some variety show that he's donating to some charity most of his fight purse.
And people were like, didn't that guy respond by saying what charity and how much are you giving?
Right, exactly, right. I'm pretty sure that RIZIN is paying him decent because he's a draw. Right. So.
Right. But you got to feel like there's also got to be I imagine there's got to be some sort of discount that attracted them to him because the domestic violence charges last year, he was the narrator of a very popular TV show called Why Did You Come to Japan?
Yeah.
He got fired from that job and they did a whole trial series where they're looking for a new narrator. But so essentially, I don't think he's working. So I think he was more than happy that RIZIN called and offered him this. But what I've noticed is it's nothing like the United States, where I think most people really don't care about the domestic violence stuff, it seems to be. And it does seem like there is some interest. It seems like it's younger people that care about the domestic violence.
This. I used to manage a gentleman named Mr. Will Chope. And like a week before his second UFC fight, I forgot the name of the media, but somebody out there broke the news about how he got into trouble with domestic violence about like 3-4 years ago in Florida. It was already done deal and everything else. And that wife who was a victim on that case said it's no big deal, but still UFC released him. They didn't even give him the second fight.
Yeah.
But now look at John Jones' case, right? I mean,
I don't remember the exact details, but didn't the same time as John Jones, the guy that they would Pena, like Angry Bob Ross,
right?
Essentially did the same thing, and they fired him, but not John Jones.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, they can't fire John Jones now, right? Because he could easily go to Bellator or any competitor of the UFC,
go wherever he wanted to go.
Obviously. So if you're that good enough, you could just do pretty much anything, you know?
Right. Well, the Bobby stuff too is interesting because it wasn't just the wife domestic violence, where I think it was bad. I think she like had a broken bone in her face, but he's also had like a history of like attacking other people. I think like, he attacked his manager.
He like demolished like some management's office and stuff like that in the past.
He always plays like he seems to really lean into like the I didn't know what I was doing. Like just kind of like his own like comedy character of like pretending to be stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Even though, that's when it comes to the point that he lies, right? He pretend like he doesn't speak Japanese, even to the police and the in the public about the incident.
Yeah.
So he think he could get away with anything pretty much.
Right. Yeah. And I always think it's funny that people always mention the fact that he's like a K1 fighter, but I mean, he fought in like K1 one time. He's like, that's quite the label to get for fighting in the promotion one time.
Right. But I'm telling you right now, I mean, I think the rumor has already broke that RIZIN Landmark show has sold 80,000 pay-per-views, somewhere around there. And how much was that pay-per-view? It was like $50?
I think it might have been a little bit cheap. I think it was like around there. I can't quite remember the exact numbers.
Yeah, but that's still, if you do 50-50, right, between the two promotions and then you next, that's a pretty good take for the RIZIN. That's about $2 million.
Right, exactly.
I mean, on 4 fights.
Not even counting
the cost of operations.
The super expensive tickets they sold.
Right, exactly, right. So I think they have realized that, it's finally, I have to say that RIZIN has found a source, which is to make more money from the pay-per-view share instead of actual gate, I mean,
we also say that the Landmark show, I don't think it could not have gone better.
Oh, yeah.
Because all but one of the fights ended in very dramatic, so the first 3 fights were all dramatic finishes.
Right.
And then you had the last fight, which was 2 very popular fighters. And so it just was kind of it went like, if you want to have a launching event for a new type of event, it was the perfect one for them.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. But the point I'm trying to get into is because the Ologun and all these guys who is in the additional card of the RIZIN 32, I think RIZIN realized that they need to create a character that could sell the pay-per-view. And, I mean, it's not like a UFC is different, right? UFC has this UFC strategy. It's about the branding of UFC and everything else. But the RIZIN, I think they're more about the individual, obviously, because if they don't have a Mikuru, they would never get that kind of number. So they need to create next, second, third, fourth Mikuru.
Well, also, this reminded me, unrelated to that, but it reminded me, RIZIN is all about discount celebrities. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with the Japanese TV show, Ame Talk?
Yes.
The host of Ame Talk got fired essentially because he was doing deals outside of his management company. And he was like after that, when he had no job, he was essentially the guest ring announcer for a RIZIN
I remember
event.
that. I saw him there. I was there at that show, right? I was kind of shocked to see him,
I feel like RIZIN is always waiting on the sidelines for like a celebrity to mess up. And they're like, all right, we can get this guy for cheap and use it to boost our pay-per-view numbers, our YouTube numbers. and when we're done with it, just cast him aside, kind of.
This has nothing to JMMA, but I kind of half feel bad about that Ame Talk incident because most of the comedians at Yoshimoto, they get 10% and management takes 90.
Yeah.
So, it's almost like a mutual understanding that they too take job outside the management.
Right.
And, come on. Lots of times in Japanese world of night business, you do sort of get involved with somebody who's involved with the Yakuza.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I mean, it did sound like a weird situation to me where it sounded like he was just trying to get a little side hustle going on to make some actual money, and people got upset about it.
Right. Well, let's see. I mean, Daniel is saying, hold on, let's go back. We got a comment. It's a common problem for African athletes, for example, when they're going to Europe to play football, there are often some problem with their ages. Meaning, okay.
Yeah, because I think one of the time, I'm not 100% the biggest Bobby Ologun fan, but there's some legal incident where they discovered he lied on his Japanese paperwork about how old he was.
But it's so funny. I'll tell you this on the record. I bet you the Japanese city hall workers, when it comes to something outside Japan or something outside the Japanese language, they just don't want to check it. They don't even want to deal with it.
So why do you think he wanted to be younger? Do you think he thought it looked better for when he got jobs or for his
I think so.
fighting career?
Yeah, and also not only fighting, I bet you he was thinking about his entertainment career.
Right.
Yes, and in Japan, I guess it's better to be younger, right? I mean, in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of the female so-called idols, in the beginning, they used to kind of lie ages, even like 2-3 years,
Just seems less common with a guy, but I have heard about it with some athletes, especially some like Cuban boxers and apparently, according to the comment, Nigerian athletes playing soccer as well.
Right. Now, how much do you know about Ologun's opponent, Mr. Katsuya Kitamura?
But the most important,
wasn't he? No.
Oh well, there's Jamie's comments.
Yeah, his opponent has a quite amateur wrestling background. All right, what did he do?
He's a pro wrestler.
Right.
And
so it's sort of surprising. It's common for Japanese pro wrestling world to recruit, those national wrestling champions anyway, right? So,
right. Well, I mean, it's kind of the perfect match because you got to remember, Bobby looks like he's in good shape, but he is 55 years old.
Right.
So you have to find kind of an opponent on the same playing field, and you get a popular pro wrestler.
You know what? I don't know anything about this guy, but by looking at him, he looks like the guy who competes in like World's Strongest Man contest. I mean, really. I mean, he's much bigger, right? Because they talked about some weight at the press conference. Some reporter asked about Ologun's weight, and he made a mistake. He misunderstood that they were talking about Kitamura's actual weight and blah blah blah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's at 120 kilograms. So I mean, that's absolutely huge.
Like open weight, right?
That's essentially what is that? It's close to like 250 pounds.
Yes,
very giant weight. Yeah. And Bobby doesn't look like he weighs that much.
Well, anyway, but I think they're trying to build Bobby Ologun again for maybe next RIZIN landmark talent. They're gonna keep pumping up those talent to score numbers through UNEXT. And Daniel said landmark was 2,000 to 3,000 yen. So even though it was 3,000 yen, I think each would take home about $1.2 million. I think if you sell 80,000.
Well, also I think you're exactly right about the pay-per-views, especially that Landmark 1 was such a success. And I imagine that Landmark 2 will be more successful because I think a lot of people didn't buy Landmark 1 because they were like, oh, they'll just put it up on YouTube. And then it's never been put up. Those fights were never put up on YouTube.
No.
The only way you can see those, even parts of those fights, is to watch the RIZIN Confession video.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you this. That Trigger event, is this going to be on Fuji television? No, right?
No way that's going to be on Fuji television.
Exactly. So where that's going to be on air?
Yeah, so it'd be the next, probably be UNEXT is the same, probably, right?
I hope UNEXT or maybe even some other streaming company. If I was like a Gibara, I might just discuss it with somebody else. Why not have like a relationship with a streaming company as well?
I want to apologize. I said he was 55. For some reason, I thought Bobby was 55 years old. He's 48 years old.
Oh, 48. Okay, yeah. But still, he's old.
Yeah.
Yeah, 48. I mean, yeah, well, But anyway, so, yeah. anyway, we'll go back to Trigger event, whatever. But any other cards on RIZIN 32 Okinawa show?
Wait. No, I think he is 55 years old.
Oh,
I think 48. I think 48 is the year he lied and told everybody what he was. That he's actually 55 years old.
All right. Well,
I'm sorry. What would you ask?
Any other fight card on Okinawa RIZIN 32 show that you're interested in?
I mean, obviously, I'm interested in the Rena and Miyu fight.
Yeah, of course, right.
It's kind of like the perfect timing for the rematch because it was Miyu's very first fight that they fought, and Rena has also come a long way. I think it was her second pro fight.
Yeah.
So they both come a long way in their careers, but it's kind of hard to remove the fact that Miyu's now in her late 40s.
Well,
and I mean, age, I know she looks great, but I feel like age has to catch up to her eventually.
Eventually, right.
Eventually. She's 47. But in her first fight, essentially all she knew how to do was wrestle. And I feel like now she's more equipped to deal with the grappling.
I think so too.
I think she's more equipped to deal with the grappling than Rena is to deal with the wrestling.
Right. And the point is, her ring age is not that old. So
right.
And maybe a few more years she could do it,
Rena has been training a lot at Miyata's gym for wrestling. So it'll be interesting to see what she brings. But and it's also worth noting the fight is at 50 kilograms. And I know that Rena has struggled to make weight in the past. I believe she was hospitalized while cutting weight.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So I feel like it's 50 kilograms probably because of her. Sure. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Rena is obviously clearly the better striker. Miyu is clearly the better wrestler. It'll just be interesting to see where the fight goes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, Rena has to try to avoid going to the ground. So I think it's going to be a classic style of like striker versus grappler, right? I mean, wrestler, I would say.
Because the first fight was weird because she caught Miyu in a choke, and it looked like in her first couple fights, Miyu had very little submission defense.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. She didn't know anything about MMA back then.
She was getting caught in arm bars from guard, and she's getting choked out. Just that's all that was happening. And you got to feel like she's more aware of that now. But it'll be interesting because it does. I do think that Miyu. I think she gets tired. I think her stamina is suffering, especially in the Ham Sohee fight. It looked like she just kind of got exhausted, and Ham Sohee was able to get the TKO.
Yeah, we'll see because we have no idea what kind of training she's getting,
Yeah.
So she really have to do a real good fight camp to get her, get her cardio going,
Yeah.
Especially like a striking cardio if she's not used to, right?
Yeah. I mean, Miyu hits hard. She has good punches. She trains at Siwoo Park, who's a very good striker in herself. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think she should just not strike at all. Fight like Ben Askren.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm serious. I mean, why not? I mean, you don't want to stand on against a girl who's been striking for last 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know what? Another fight I'm actually interested in is this one: Tomohiro Adaniya versus Yuichi Miyagi. The reason for that is this kid Adaniya fought Naoki Inoue right before Inoue went to fight for UFC, and I was already talking to Mick Maynard about his contract and stuff like that. But this is the fight he had to take. So if he lost the fight against Adaniya or didn't look good against him, maybe he would have never gotten that UFC contract.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was a 2-round fight, and actually this one went to the judges' scorecard, and some people argue that Adaniya has won that fight. So it was a close fight, which I agree, but So I think that's another fight that maybe fans can take a look back and enjoy. Adaniya versus Inoue. Yeah. But what happened was, Naoki caught Adaniya with the armbar early in the first round. And I think Adaniya tried to escape it between the ropes, went outside and something like that. So I use that as an excuse when I talk to UFC. Oh, if that was in cage, that's it. You would have won that. So, Adaniya is pretty good. And he's from Okinawa. That's why he got booked, I'm imagining, right? So, but overall, I mean, it's a decent card. It looks like it's better than RIZIN 31 still. It's Koji,
right? Did you see the footage of Koji doing the pro wrestling where he finished the match with a headbutt?
No. Well, that's funny. Yeah, he did that, huh?
They had a pro wrestling match where some guy held up his opponent, he headbutted him and like knocked him out.
Yeah, that's too funny.
He's like leaning into it now.
But again, I think RIZIN 32 looks better than 31 in terms of.
But will it deliver? Because 31 delivered.
Right, exactly. That's why actually I want to talk about 31 now. I think we need to talk about Saori Oshima since her fight against Kana Asakura is scoring what, second highest YouTube viewership right now? Out of
highest,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's actually pulling ahead. It's not even becoming close anymore.
I think many general fans are just surprised that Oshima was that good. But I think most of the people in the industry knew that she's pretty solid, or more than solid. She's got a very good background, right, in judo.
Well, I would say that it was kind of an interesting matchup because I would say even people in the industry were surprised at how it went.
Mm.
I think the thought process was Saori Oshima is very good, but she's never fought anyone at Kana Asakura's level.
Right, in that level, right.
So you really don't know how good she's going to be. And then there's always the nagging concern that Kana Asakura also fights at not Kana Asakura, Saori Oshima also fights at microweight.
Right, 95 pounds.
She's 4'11".
Right.
And so she's only been doing MMA for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how this goes. And it was a split decision. I don't think that was fair. I think Saori Oshima essentially dominated the fight.
I thought so, dude. I thought when she was on the bottom. 3-0, right.
Even when she was on the bottom,
mm-hmm.
It was like the rare Boss Rutan title match victory where even when she was on the bottom, she was scoring all of the points.
Mm-hmm.
And she completely frustrated Kana Asakura's game.
Oh, I know. And, I think it's kind of obvious that Saori is a superior athlete as a combat athlete. I mean, her technique is much sharper. And it's hard to beat that, yeah.
That's what I was talking to my wife about it and some friends as well. I was saying that the weird thing about Kana Asakura is that Kana Asakura was a wrestler, but she wasn't a super high-level wrestler.
Mm. No, she was never. Yeah.
She didn't go to college for wrestling.
No.
She wasn't going to national tournaments and doing well. Where Saori Oshima was a very high-level judoka and went to the same university as Miki Motono and Kana Watanabe for judo. I think she has her judo career was 20 years long. And I think she actually did win when she was a junior. I think she won the national tournament at 44 kilograms. So she's a very good judoka.
Right. So it's a national level fighter.
Yeah, exactly. And
so
she didn't look nervous. She didn't. She went straight at Kana, and I thought her judo looked really good, especially for applying it to MMA.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I mean, she already fought 2 years in MMA, so she knows how to do it. Obviously.
Right. And well, I was kind of worried as well because she fought Siwoo Park twice.
Mm-hmm.
And in both fights, it's very clear Saori Oshima's weakness is her striking. And not necessarily her striking, it's the fact that she's 4'11", and that she's fighting a tall striker. The tall striker can hit her.
Right.
And Siwoo Park was able to hit her in their first fight, but in the second fight, once it got to the ground, Saori Oshima finished it quite quickly. Well, what I was surprised about in this fight was Saori Oshima's striking looks a lot better. And I thought she was also out-striking Kana.
Mm-hmm.
And in her corner was Rena, so it's very clear that she's been working with Rena a lot on her striking. But I think it's the best thing for the atomweight division, the super atomweight division, is to get some fresh young blood in there.
Oh yeah.
Because outside of Kana and Hertz, Emi Fujino, who's close to 40, if not 40. I think she's 39. It's Ayaka Hamasaki, who's 39. It's Miyamoto's 47. It's Rena, who's close to retiring. So I think this is what the RIZIN division needed.
Right. So it's great, even though Saori is so much smaller, but with her skill set, she should be able to hang in there.
Her grappling looked unreal.
Right.
I thought it looked really good. And she's got some unique branding perspectives. She's a mother of twins.
Yep.
And I mean, my wife and her friends, none of them like it's no secret, none of them like Panchan Rena because they think
Why is that though?
They think Panchan Rena tries too hard to be cute. and they like the fact that Saori Oshima is a mother who has 2 kids and is like doing this whole like work-life balance while also doing really well.
You know, I kind of feel bad for Panchan. Panchan, and when the girls are cute, she tend to make a lot of enemies, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna comment on that. I'm just saying that what I've noticed is a lot of the female fans, not a Panchan Rina fan, but I think Panchan makes up for it with other guy fans.
Right. Well, here's what it is, but still, yeah, I could go back to Oshima. I think she's a solid talent, and even like I mean, 105 in the Invicta division, she should be able to do all right. You know.
Well, before this fight, I would have said that the biggest women's story in Japan was Seika Izawa. But now it's very clear that the biggest breakout star for women
is Saori now.
Is Saori Oshima.
Right.
Because she won 4 fights this year. She's a champion in 2 divisions, and she just went up to RIZIN, won the biggest fight of her career, which is now the most viewed fight from that event.
Right.
And she's pretty much guaranteed a return spot at RIZIN.
Oh yeah, they had to take her back. Yeah, but you know, right now the bottom line is that RIZIN with the landmark and trigger shows, they're gonna have like a 20 shows to fill. So, like how they brought up Momoka, who lost to Panchan, they're gonna like keep using fighters. They have to.
Yeah. You know? Especially with the pandemic, they have to keep using people.
Right. So now, then, you know, I want to talk about this. So RIZIN 31 delivered, right? I mean, all the fight, there were good finishes and everything else. And let's talk about this new featherweight champion, Ushiku.
Yes.
What do you think about him? And what do you think about this whole situation?
Well, he's kind of I feel bad for him because this whole event was like an ill-conceived notion to crown Saito as some like great champion. And they went the whole route of like making him the poster.
Right.
And I think the subtext was like to be a champion or something was on it. And he's actually developed a fan base. And because the Koike fight fell through, I think the thought process of let's use this event to build him up. And I thought Saito was looking very good in the fight. He was throwing a lot of good body punches. But that knee landed. You can't argue that knee landed. It was a legal blow.
That knee landed it. Right. So under the rule, he won fair and square, right?
Yeah, he busted him up. That cut looked nasty. And it would have gotten worse. And so I think there's this weird sentiment where people wanted Saito to win and people thought he was winning and they were kind of upset the fight got stopped. But I think it was obviously rightfully stopped, and all props to Ushiku for doing it.
You know, I think Saito dominated the first round, and I think that was the reason why his stance was a little bit more forward. His weight, right? So he was going forward, and I think that's the reason why he took that knee shot. I mean, if he fought and stood like what he did in the first round, he would have taken one step back and avoided that knee shot. But anyway, so
I don't want to like speculate, but I mean, it almost seemed like he was dismissing Ushiku at that point.
Yeah, I think so. He was kind of looking down on him. He thought he can finish it, right?
Right.
So he was ready to kind of rough him up and stuff like that. You know?
And I know we talked about in the We Are RIZIN podcast, but the important note is that Daisuke Nakamura beat Ushiku this year. That Daisuke Nakamura has a knockout victory from 2021 over the current RIZIN champion.
Yeah, exactly. Now here's what it is. So good finish, fans enjoyed it. And if I said this in the Japanese in Twitter and all that, I bet you all this RIZIN fan will kill me. But I thought the whole entire show, the level of the fighters, skill sets, everything else is just a little bit below than any of the RIZIN shows.
I would agree. I mean, there's a lot of fighters making their promotional debut. It seemed like they're kind of digging around to find fighters, especially the guy that fought Daisuke Nakamura, knee. That guy looks like I think his record's like 50-50 or close to that.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, there are a couple guys in the Trigger show that looks like it's not really a so-called major league talent. You know what I mean?
Right. So I think as long as they delivered exciting fights, I think it's forgivable. Because RIZIN's just biding its time. It has to put on events.
Exactly, right.
I'll tell you this: I went to some MMA gyms recently. there is like a little boom going on. There are more people signing up for MMA classes.
Oh yeah, I know.
People
So
are into it.
actually, you got to give Sakakibara and RIZIN people credit, because RIZIN is still getting a pretty good brand name establishment now in Japan, right?
Right.
So they've spent about 5 years now, so it's kind of established, recognized. That's why now they're doing, good pay-per-views, right?
Yeah. And
everything else. Now, here's what it is. I think, even though, I'm going to tell you this. One of our sponsors, who sponsors one of our clients, recently called me and asked me for a discount for all my RIZIN clients. And his reason was this. Shu, I feel like I'm watching a deep show and just in the bigger venue.
Wasn't that the whole? Wasn't? I mean, I think I've heard people joking that RIZIN 31 was just deep versus Pancrase.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like watching deep or Pancrase shooter shows. It just happened to be in a bigger venue. So therefore, I think the exposure level is not that different from deep or Pancrase or shooter. So I should get a discount. Was this guy's theory?
Well, that's not. I understand the caliber of fighter. I agree, but the exposure level, I think, is on a completely different.
I said the exact same thing. Caliber of the fighters, agree, but yeah, exposure level. However, the 31 was not aired in Fuji Television.
That's true.
Right. So that's a big difference, right there.
But I mean, the what is it? The Oshima fight. It's getting close to 800,000 views in 1 week. So I mean, they're getting a lot of views.
No, but here's what it is. That I talked about that with all my sponsors, but YouTube views are not necessarily tells how many people watched it. Because if you like that fighter, the one person could watch 10 times.
Right.
So it's not like a viewing home, or like it's different from the ratings. So it's hard to really prove that in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so
interesting.
Yeah. So it's just I'm getting again. I said no to discounts, just so you know.
Also, the
deal,
I was also surprised. The event sold quite well. The event sold out essentially. It's 4,800 and something seats.
Exactly, right. So, I mean, the bottom line here is that it's recognized by the general public now. So it's recognized as the event for regular maybe couples to go to instead of going to some concert, right? Or go to see the movies, that type of stuff. So it's good. So, but it come to the point is like, do you think this guy Ushiku, is he legit? I mean,
he's a good fighter.
Well, I know he is a good fighter,
and he was the deep champion. He is the deep champion. The problem is with this win, it was so slapped together because he had never fought in RIZIN before.
Right.
I think a lot of the people are probably unfamiliar with who he is.
Right.
Like, this is supposed to be Saito's crowning moment. All of a sudden, this guy comes that we don't know who he is, and he wins. What the hell's going on?
Exactly. That's what this makes it like. I guess RIZIN is part entertainment too, so maybe they're not thinking about creating a ranking or anything like that. But to create a ranking in the featherweight, it's going to be very difficult from my point of view, because in my eyes, guys like Horie or Majima, which is notch above Ushiku. You know what I mean? So these guys will beat Ushiku.
Well, it's weird because there can't be a ranking system, because RIZIN is like this unique promotion that essentially they have very few RIZIN devoted athletes. And they borrow a ton of fighters. So unless they're going to make like a general Japanese MMA ranking, there really can't be a RIZIN ranking.
Exactly. So I mean, there's a rumor about the featherweight Grand Prix next year, and they're mixing the names of like guy like even Hagiwara or my client Yamamoto, along with the other guys like Krebel, Koike, and like a Mikuru or Majima, Horie. That's a different level of athletes there.
Exactly. I mean, I think Sakakibara said in the post-fight press conference that the division's kind of chaos now, and he wants to do a Grand Prix to kind of organize everything. And I think the good news is there are enough featherweights to put on an exciting Grand Prix, especially with Kanehara getting the big win at 31. There's some big names and some big fighters they can put into it.
Right. But you know what? I would be concerned if I were Sakakibara. Like I said, now he's still like creating another source of income, which is like a pay-per-view through UNext, which heavily relies on the younger viewers. right? And star powers and stuff like that. And the one of that is Kyohei Hagiwara, obviously. But in my eyes, most of the guys we just mentioned, if you throw him in there in Featherweight Grand Prix, he'll get demolished.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say if I was going to do a Featherweight Grand Prix, I would not put Hagiwara in it, and I would not put Ren Hitamoto in it, because Ren Hitamoto is what realistically just starting his MMA training.
Right.
Why throw him in with Clever Koike?
Exactly. I can tell you this right now as a management Hitamoto, 100% that's not going to happen. I want to discuss that, you know?
I mean, it honestly, you haven't told me anything, but Ren Hitamoto seems almost perfect for these landmark shows.
Oh, yeah, exactly, right.
Because he has this, all of his tattoos, Fuji TV is going to have some qualms, but he's very, very popular. And why go the Fuji TV route when you can sell pay-per-views?
Exactly. And on top of that is that I think even rematch against Hagiwara will sell pay-per-view. If Hagiwara is willing to do it.
Yeah, because you do this whole story about how Hitamoto is actually training in MMA now.
Yeah, and he's in States now, and he's in he's a teammate of a guy who's going to fight Horiguchi in December. So,
and I mean, Landmark seems like the perfect show. It's because it seems like I'm going to call them the RIZIN audience, who is essentially like the young, internet savvy fans.
Yes,
and they're the ones who I think would be into the Landmark cards.
Oh,
and if you watch if you look at the crowd in the Landmark RIZIN Confession, or when I was watching the event, there's a lot of young women in the crowd, which makes me wonder, like, are these in the whole world of influencers, when there's a super exclusive event, do influencers want to take pictures and be seen at this super exclusive secretive event? And is RIZIN kind of creating this cool subculture for the Landmark cards?
Right, because they didn't even they didn't even tell the public where the venue is and stuff like that, right? So it's like a VIP, like a speakeasy kind of high-end bar, right?
When I was at the Tokyo show, there was like varying levels of influencers in the crowd, and they were just like taking hundreds of pictures of themselves at the event. So like these people want to go to these events, they want to be seen there. But going back to what you were saying, I think Kintaro would also be great for these Landmark and Trigger cards.
Oh yeah, I think so. And that's why my next point is like the Trigger show. They just announced all these additional cards. And sure, the RIZIN has their own RIZIN, whatever, live entertainment platform and stuff like that. But I still feel they're going to look for another, place to air this. It has to,
What's fun about the Trigger card is the whole concept is interesting. It's young fighters and old fighters. So it seems like it's half Veterans League, half developmental.
Right.
And to me, this is like, this is where you put Daisuke Nakamura.
Exactly.
Where he should go.
Here's what it is, though. This is what I'm feeling, because guy like Shoji or Rikuto Shirakawa, they're basically riding off on the tail of Asakura Brothers, getting good YouTube numbers, right?
Right.
So putting him against Hagiwara, I think they're gearing more towards that crowd, right?
Right. And Shoji's created, you're right, Shoji has created a positive, he's one of the few fighters to create a following on social media.
Right. I mean, that the T-shirt he has, it says Doko Demo instead of Dokomo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doko Demo means he's everywhere. Like
they're always joking about that.
Right.
And I think the RIZIN Confession videos have done a great job promoting him, and he's got fans. People like Shoji, and people like Hagiwara. So I think it's going to be this is like the perfect thing for a Trigger card, because this fight alone sells the tickets.
Oh yeah,
people will come to this show to see this fight.
Right. And just to mention to our listeners that Shoji has fought Jose Aldo before Aldo signed WEC.
Back in the Pancrase days.
Yeah, I can tell you this right now because I was working for Bodok Fight as a fight team, and we signed Jose Aldo, but Bodok was falling apart, so we couldn't give him a fight. So back then, we're in a partnership with Pancrase, so I begged Pancrase to take Aldo, Thiago Alves, and all these couple of guys. That's why they were able to fight in Pancrase when they were unknown. So all the Pancrase fans got to see a fresh Jose Aldo back then.
Did Jose Aldo win by soccer kicks? I'm trying to remember.
It went to the 3-round decision, I think.
I thought I remembered some old fight where he landed a brutal soccer kick, but
no, but
thankfully that wasn't Shoji.
Jose Aldo almost demolished Shoji on the first round, but Shoji came back. He
really?
just took a lot of hits. But he was one of the up and coming younger guy. But I knew he was tough, So Shoji's a good fighter. There's no doubt about that. He's past the peak, but he found a good place in the market, right?
Exactly.
Almost like he found a niche over others.
Especially after his last fight with like a 20-second knockout.
Well, my God for him, right? So the point is, he's now sort of like another popular YouTuber, almost, right? And fighting Hagiura, who's also attracted underground card.
Exactly.
So I really think Trigger Show is going to do another streaming company. Maybe not the.
You think they're going to try to pit companies against each other and see what happens?
Yeah, exactly. I think they should go with Abema. Why not at this point?
Yeah.
Give Abema one show, and we'll see.
We'll talk about Abema later, but the Abema does some interesting stuff.
Right, very interesting stuff. So the other thing that is any other card you're interested in this RIZIN Trigger show?
Yeah, if you keep scrolling down, obviously there's Strasser is a cool signing, a cool addition to the card. But I believe Tedayama is on this card, the kickboxer.
Okay.
And he's got, let's see.
Jimon. You know what? I don't really follow these kickboxers.
Oh, well, that's interesting. So the guy above Momoka, that's her cousin.
Okay.
Jin Mandokoro. That is that's Momoko's cousin. So that's why they're both on the card together.
That's
if you go down, there's a Tedayama, and the reason that maybe the picture isn't up yet.
That's the end, yeah.
But the reason I'm interested in Terayama being added to RIZIN is that he's actually, I think he might be on the Okinawa card, but I'll bring it up anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
It's because he is Hinata Terayama's brother.
Oh, okay.
And Panchan Rina has been calling out Hinata for wanting to fight her on the New Year's Eve card.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting to me that there's really been Rise has not been warm to that comment.
Yeah, that's true.
But it then is interesting to see her brother get put on a RIZIN card, which makes me start wondering, is there some deal where she's saying, I'll fight for RIZIN, but you got to put my teammates and my brother on some events in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, most interesting is finally Mr. Kiichi got a fight in RIZIN after campaigning through his YouTube channel for almost
finally worked.
years.
So is he the guy that's from the rough part of Osaka?
I'm not really sure if he's coming from the rough part of Osaka, but his brother and family has a very successful sewage business.
Okay, so I remember there's some fighter that was fighting in the UFC, and part of the UFC video was him walking around this really rough part of Osaka where all these homeless people live, under a bridge.
I wouldn't be surprised, right? Because I don't get into too much about his profile, but yeah, he is from that part of Osaka, and but he's actually very successful. Way before he became big time, he was already driving Mercedes. Yeah, so I knew him for a long time because when I arranged him to train at the Strasser's place, and back then, the very first time when I met him, he was only a rookie in MMA, and he showed up in a very nice white Mercedes and picked me up. So I'm like, whoa,
But when you look at the card, he's the one that sticks out to me as well as being on the card, and
it's too bad.
He's got the most international competition of anyone on the card.
Exactly, but the point is that isn't he still under the Bellator contract? Same as my client Anzai too. Those guys got signed to Bellator through RIZIN because of the pandemic. Sitting, which is fine, but
and you got to think that he's been released if this is happening, or if it's just part of the Bellator RIZIN working relationship.
Yeah, maybe right.
But he's 0-2 in Bellator and hasn't fought there since 2019.
Right. So maybe there's no reason to bring him back. Maybe they released him. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So now I don't even know about anything about his opponent, but I'm pretty sure this is someone that he should be able to win.
Right. Yeah. His opponent is looking 15-7. So, but he's a Grachan fighter who's coming off a KO in the first round. But
they're really mixing up all these, not just the deep pancreas Shuto, Grachan, Nexus, Gladiator champions,
It's awesome because especially at RIZIN 31. You're like, okay, we have a Fighting Nexus guy, we have Outsiders guy, we have Grachan. It's nice to see all of the promotions represented.
Oh yeah, and it's at the bottom line, it does tell who really is the better fighter or which promotion has a better fighters, you know. Yeah. Now, okay, let's talk about, I want to talk about this one because in the Japanese media, everybody's all bummed about the fact that Tenshin versus Takeru is probably not happening.
Right. Now, wasn't a big boxing match was announced, right?
Yes. Ryota Murata's world title fights is announced for 29th on Saitama Super Arena. And that Saitama Super Arena it's not announced yet. Actually, it's a rumor.
And I thought I saw a rumor where Sakakibara said if that boxing event happens,
he will
be co-promoted with through RIZIN.
Exactly, right. Because he does have the rights to that venue on 29.
Right.
So that means is they just lost the venue. Does that mean that this is not happening?
Doesn't look like it.
No. That's what I saw too, because this was supposed to be K1 versus RIZIN, like all-out war. And that's why K1's show in November had not many top K1 fighters announced on that card. However, right after this rumor circulated, K1 added many top fighters into that November show. So that's a clear sign that they're not really sending anybody to December Eve. December, New Year's Eve,
Why should things change? RIZIN and K1 have never been able to work together in the past, and it looks like it's not going to happen in the future.
Right. But too bad that this is a big time fight that they would have created a lot of income on this one.
They would have both made a ton of money with this fight.
Ton of money.
Because they could have charged so much money for tickets.
Right. And they didn't even have to do this K1 versus RIZIN the whole thing.
No.
They could have just like meaningless 10 fights and plus this one fight on the top of the card and that's it.
Well, my thinking is just like, that's probably what all the stupid little details like that are probably what caused it to fall apart. When they really should just only concentrated on this fight.
Because, it's really clear and simple because K1 wants to get all the profit on Takeru. And of course, RIZIN wants to get all the profit on Tenshin. So they should just go 50-50, period, on everything, right?
Right.
And forget the other fighters. Who cares? Because they ain't going to count on the pay-per-views, but I guess
they're not going to sell a single ticket that Takeru and Tenshin wouldn't already sell.
Right. But here's what it is. I think that from K1's point of view, their biggest fear is what if Takeru loses badly? Because that's just going to create the mode that K1 is not that as good as the RIZIN kickboxing.
Right. RIZIN has nothing to lose because Tenshin is moving to boxing.
Exactly. They have nothing to lose. So as RIZIN, right? They both got nothing to lose.
Whereas K1 has everything to lose.
Yeah. So I guess maybe that's the reason why this is not happening.
Yeah, but you would think that something like maybe a rematch clause might be able to help. But who knows? That's probably why it's not happening.
That's not going to happen. You know what? Yeah. It's so funny, Charlie. We talked about it. I can tell this right now. And they were still arguing about the weight. And forget the weight now, right? Because if it's going to happen. You know what? Many guys told me, everybody told me this. Yeah, but sure, that's okay. Once they agree, they'll announce the fight. They'll go back to the table discussing about weight. I don't understand that mentality. You have to agree to the weight and everything first before you announce it. But in the Japanese fight sports, people think that way.
Yeah.
No, they agree. They agree to fight, so that's fine. We announce. Then we can go back and talk about weight. I'm like, why?
What's especially kind of sad about this, though, is that you get the impression that Takeru wants the fight.
I think so, too.
He went to for him to go to those RIZIN shows, I think was very big. And he's never been one to go against what K1 says, but within what he's able to do, I think he's made it clear that he wants the fight.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you this clearly that in terms of the pay scale of the K1 fighter versus the guys in RIZIN or MMA fighter getting, it's much higher than K1. So K1 fighter knows that because fighters talk to each other, trainers talk to each other. And so this is a huge payday for Takeru. Huge. Yeah. So, of course, he wants to do it, but
they're also running out of time because I know that Japanese promotions like to promote stuff last minute, but if you're going to do a big New Year's Eve card, I feel like
but here's the point. You just said that actually, I forgot to mention about that. Thank you. You just mentioned that yes, most of the promotion does everything last minute. However, except K1, ever since
really?
it's under the new ownership and working with Abema, that they're the only promotion in Japan that announces card 2-3 months ahead of time. Yeah, that's why everything was very odd for me. That they're not putting, they recently announced additional card, which is they really don't do,
Yeah. I just don't see. I mean, if it happens, I'd be really happy, but I just don't think it's going to happen, especially now that boxing event has been announced.
No.
Or rumored.
Right. So, I mean, do you think the fans, everybody's sort of disappointed? What's the voices of the fans in Japan?
Well, I mean, they're happy disappointed. Because this is a big fight that everybody wants to see. Right, and it's the biggest kickboxing fight to make.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of like the Floyd Mayweather-Pacquiao situation where this is the time to make it. People don't want to see this 5 years from now.
Well, then let me ask you this. Besides this, there's another show in Japan this weekend called VTJ. Is anybody talking about this show in Japan?
People are talking about it, and it was kind of funny because I'll tie in several topics here. One Championship, their atomweight tournament, has completely fallen apart.
Oh, I know. I feel bad for them, though.
Has the shit has hit the fan.
Sure.
Ham Sohee out with injury. They asked Denise to come back in as a replacement. Right. Denise out with injury. And then Itsuki Hirata out with injury. And this is not ignoring all the stuff with the being delays. She's not out with the injury. Itsuki Hirata had a fever that didn't go away. Right. And everyone knows One Championship is in Singapore, which is very strict COVID protocol. So even though she tested positive for COVID, I doubt with a fever if they would have let her into the country.
Right.
That's probably why that fight was scrapped. And so now you go to the semifinals where two alternates are facing two fighters.
I know.
So I say all this because the tournament, the fights last weekend were on Abema, but they were put essentially on the backdoor channel. They weren't on the main Takatogi channel. They were on the second channel. They had 5,000 people watching. So not doing well. The main channel was VTJ replays.
Really? How many? What's the viewership on VTJ?
I didn't see the numbers because I was watching on my TV. I only know the One Championship because I pulled my phone out to look at it. But they were showing old Megumi Fuji fights on VTJ on the main Takatogi channel, and they had the live One Championship show off on the back burner.
The One Championship postponed the 10th anniversary show too, right? Indefinitely to January.
So it's just interesting. Without Itsuki on the one show, you can see that Abema's priorities are VTJ.
Right. Now, the VTJ successfully brought in one fighter from overseas.
Yes.
Yes, who is fighting Tatsuro Taira.
Oh, interesting.
And I mean, I know everything about it, so I'll tell you this, but they got the special visa through Mr. Genki Sudo, who is a senator. And therefore, they got, instead of going through a 14-day quarantine, they have this special strict rules they have to follow. Instead, they're only dealing with a 3-day quarantine. But the VTJ were forced to rent the entire floor of the hotel, make sure they're locked in, staff on each exit door and everything like that. So
my immediate question is, Sakakibara has to know a politician. Why wasn't RIZIN doing this stuff?
I think they're working on it. And I think it's going to happen for December show.
Because Genki Sudo is clearly the guy to call for this. Because his whole campaign, he's been tweeting and talking nonstop about how the pandemic needs to stop affecting people's work and things.
Right. And I think both Mr. Sakamoto from VTJ and Mr. Ito from RIZE were officially did the interview about how they got worked with Mr. Genki Sudo. They start bringing fighter from overseas and blah, blah, blah. Right.
I think this would be a good point to also mention. Corona numbers are very low in Japan right now. I think it's less than 100 people a day.
Yeah.
And so you should expect to see things opening up, which is probably how he was able to get this through.
Well, Daniel is asking, I'm not sure if VTJ 2020 isn't just a part of Shuto's event.
So I will say it is confusing. I was confused as well. Because Shuto and VTJ are run by the same people, and they're holding their event at the same venue on the same day.
Right. Yeah, but it's like almost like how they do Deep Jewel show in the morning and Deep at night on the same venue, right?
Right. Well, I think the problem is the way that Shuto uses their Twitter account. They would tweet out a picture of the VTJ fight. In the same tweet, they would also include a picture of a Shuto fight. And so
Well, here's what it is. I think those listeners,
they were like mixing it together. They should have kept it separate.
Right. Exactly. But here's what it is. Those Shuto old, the listeners who doesn't know the old Shuto, I think Shuto used to be a ring, and it never did the unified rule. They had to knock down rules. They have their own rules and everything else. So, but they started the VTJ as an offshoot event for the cage show. I mean, in the beginning it was a ring for the to bring in Rickson Gracie, but later when they restarted it, it was to do unified rules on the cage show, right? Did the Megumi Fuji versus Jessica Aguilar. And I'll tell you this right now on the record. Then stopped it, and Shuto didn't do too well, but now they start working with Abema TV. So under the Abema TV's backup, they have decided to restart the VTG, another brand again. I think what they're trying to do is, instead of doing regular Shuto shows, they're thinking about doing VTJ as like a big offshoot to Shuto shows, maybe 2-3 times a year.
Well, that's kind of what it was like back in 2010, back when it was
right.
Shuto. I mean, it seemed like VTJ was having all the big fights. But I understand what Daniel's saying, because I was also initially confused because of the way that Shuto was promoting it.
Of course.
But
I think different tickets and stuff, right? I mean, you can't watch. I mean, you could watch 2 shows, but you have to pay double, or.
Oh no, I think it's going to be like when Deep does a morning show and an afternoon show.
Okay.
It's one of those things where I imagine it's just cheaper for them to rent the venue for the whole day, because it's probably like Shinjuku Face, where you have to do the morning or the evening.
Right.
And they're just getting both of them. But it was just confusing because they were like, their promotional materials was promoting both of them at the same time. But I think they're 2 separate events.
Right. Now, so Taira is fighting Alfredo Muayat from Chile, but this is at the 58.5 kilo instead of regular 125. It's almost like 130.
Right.
Yeah. And nobody's really talking about the weight or anything, but I guess it's okay, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the big fight's obviously Cal Uno is kind of the face of Shuto and VTJ. So it's good to see him back. But after his last fight was such a brutal knockout loss,
right?
Kind of worried about how he's going to do.
I love Cal Uno, of course, he's a legend and everything. But again, I must say that Japanese MMA is still relying on these fighters from the 90s. And I mean, I would say the early 2000s. I mean, Kanehara, too. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great fighter, right? He's tough and stuff like that. But in his age, he's way past his peak. What the hell is other young featherweights in Japan are doing? You know what I mean? I mean, I think Kawajiri pointed out a few things too,
Well, I think it's just, I'm just surprised you haven't seen more like damaged older fighters in Japan, because some of these fighters like Hitaoka, Cal Uno, they keep going. And I don't know if I want to see them get knocked out anymore. Now, in Cal Uno's case, the last knockout was his last. He hasn't been knocked out in a while, but that one was just not fun to watch for me. And if he doesn't win this fight, I think maybe he should start going like the Yu Kondo, Daisuke Nakamura route and start fighting people closer to his level.
Exactly. That's fine too. But the problem is like why he keeps, I mean, really, this match shouldn't happen too often. I mean, I think younger fighters just teach them a lesson that they need to go out, Well,
it is weird because when you're promoting a guy like Cal Uno, those are resources you could be using. This is nothing against him, but those are resources you could be using to promote a new younger talent.
Oh yeah, of course, right, exactly. So why don't you put him against somebody they want to promote, right?
Right. Or put someone you want to promote near the top of the card.
No, but right now, because the fact that these younger fighters are struggling against these super veterans, that tells that these younger guys are far from so-called UFC standard. They're not even surviving Contender Series.
What I've always felt is that the biggest problem with the Japanese MMA scene right now is that you have really good fighters, and then you have a bunch of prospects.
Yeah.
But there's no middle ground.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
there's no middle ground for them to grow up. I mean, to build themselves.
right.
You know?
So promotions need to find a way to start developing these fighters, because I feel like if you did a top 10 ranking, it would just be a bunch of people around 7 and then 1, 2, 3. They're like, you wouldn't be able to separate them outside of that. So they need to be able to build the fighters up and actually build a division, which they haven't been able to do in a long time.
Exactly. That's exactly the point I wanted to talk about. This Taira and also Nishikawa, who is going to be fighting in VTJ. They're two very young, good-looking talents. However, it's still, in my point of view, it's still unproven because they have never really faced top talents, period, in terms of world-class talent. I mean, they all only beat the mediocre fighters or their past legend who was past the peak, like Yoshiro Maeda. Yeah, that can be the good yardstick. So for this fight coming up against Taira, against Muayad, who's from, like, Chilean promotion champion, right? So it's not like he's like a top world class. But if Taira has a trouble beating this guy, it's a sad news for the Japanese MMA, in a way.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking the same thing because I went to the deep shows recently, and they have some good looking prospects, but I would like to see those guys gradually fighting better and better talent.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can actually see how good they are. It's like it's kind of like going back to the Saori Oshima fight. Nobody knew how the Kana Asakura fight was going to go because Saori Oshima had never fought anyone close to that level before.
Right. But, by looking at her, it's kind of obvious she's a pretty solid athlete. Of course, she's small, short, so that's the biggest disadvantage. But hey, she'll be fine,
Yeah, and because one of the guys was in Deep Ray Tsuraya, who's like the son of the coach of Paresta.
Right.
I think he's 3-0, so he's just starting out. He's a good-looking prospect. I want to see them, but the problem is, does him smashing a bunch of people in the first round develop him into a good fighter?
Exactly, but I think Saikian knows that, so I think he's going to start matching him up against somebody a little more solid. You have to do that.
Yeah.
Well, there's somebody asking, why waste money bringing in a fighter from Chile?
Well, probably because it's super cheap. I mean, would it be cheap? How much are you paying a guy from Chile?
Well, I know all of that, but I tell you this: why it is important for VTJ to bring a fighter from overseas. One, because you have to attract a guy like Taira Nishikawa to stay with VTJ. I mean, obvious. When RIZIN was planning Okinawa show, of course they want to book Taira. He's the biggest name in Okinawa now, but decided to stay with the VTJ. And part of the reason because he's ready to fight non-Japanese. That's something that RIZIN couldn't deliver for him. And there's a few other reasons too. But so, yeah, just to answer your question, I think that's the one of the reason why I wouldn't say they wasted the money, but they wanted to go out and reach out and establish a new, to, get a more overseas market,
Well, isn't the old, essentially Japanese method of building stars that you have them fight international fighters?
Exactly. And I tell you this right now, I talk to Abema and stuff, so I do it on the record. I do always recommend them to go and develop your own market in terms of discovering fighters, because right now, everywhere you go, UFC takes the best guys. Or the other top guy wants to go to UFC, right? So you have to find somebody who's, I'm not saying doesn't want to go, but not ready to go for next at least 2-3 years, or old but good, but too old to get there, kind of stuff. There are a lot of interesting fighters out there, and I always tell this: you have to look into Brazil, because even though Brazil, like people say, dime a dozen, and there's a bunch of guys. I'm telling you right now, still there are a lot of good talents there, and they're dying for opportunity. I mean? Yeah, so Chile isn't even a top 50 MMA country. Yeah, of course, but you have to understand that to get a special visa during the time of pandemic, we have to choose the countries that has a good relationship with the Japanese government to begin with. And it's really a handful, actually.
Well, also, it's just, who's available? There's probably hundreds of factors.
You'd be surprised. We really tried to book Nishikawa's opponent from America too, but a lot of people doesn't want to travel far right now. And I'm telling you right now, most of the European country or the South, like industrialized countries, fighter wants to go to UFC, so they don't want to take risk fighting a pretty good guy. Taking a flight 20 hours out there, right? going through quarantine, far from home. So you'd be surprised, you might think, oh, if it's a fight opportunity in Japan, a fighter will immediately jump onto this opportunity. It's not like that now.
So do you ever see a place where Abima kind of replaces Shuto with VTJ, or do you see them as always having both on?
I think you're always having both.
Okay.
You know why? Because Shuto is the name they need to keep because they have a very good national wide network of amateur shows, right? And yeah, so I think eventually I have a feeling the amateur Shuto shows and there's a Shuto, and the real top guy does the once, twice a year big fights in VTJ.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And remember, not only the VTJ, like you mentioned, Bema has a very good relation with One Championship in Singapore. On top of that, they have a very good relationship that reality show Dreamers with LDH. And I'm telling this right now, like I've been telling this over and over that 5 years from now, I would say half of top MMA fighter probably will come from that Dreamer show. I'm telling you, I'm looking at those talents. They're very, very good talents out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, or from the team Brave by Mr. Miyata.
He's doing very well.
Yeah. He produces champions after champions.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
very high in that gym.
Yeah.
He's also made some interesting choices with teaming up with Triforce. They seem very open. I mean, back in the day, Japan was just, this is where you train. You don't go to other gyms because this is your gym.
Exactly.
Right. And I've noticed a lot of AAC fighters train at Brave too. And we interviewed Saori Oshima, and she was saying that, which I didn't even think of, AACC only has classes at nighttime.
Yeah, because everybody works during the day.
Yeah. And so it's kind of a remnant. I mean, it's not rare. Most MMA classes in Japan are at nighttime because almost everybody works.
Most MMA gyms don't even open before 2 p.m.
Right, but now what's happening is because of RIZIN and rising sponsorships, certain fighters are now able to train full time. Like Rena isn't answering phones somewhere. Rena is training full time, and so is Miyu Yamamoto, and it sounds like Saori Oshima. And so what do? Okay, well they can only train at AC at nighttime, so they're going to Brave during the day. They're training at places like that. They're going to boxing gyms. So it's interesting to see that it's now that more and more fighters are finding success, they're actually starting to be able to train full time.
No, I'm
telling you, it's a very good, exciting development.
It's a good thing you mentioned that. The very first thing I talked to when Naoki signed the contract with the UFC is this: I gotta get you into a situation where you can train full time. It really is, and he was able to do that from age 19. That's a huge difference, right?
Well, people always I always laugh because people from outside, they'll talk like maybe some Japanese fighter. This is like a hypothetical, goes to Invicta, doesn't do as well. And they're all like, what's going on? La, da, da. And my answer is always, this person like works as like a secretary at an office and trains MMA like 2 hours a day. Like to a lot of these Japanese fighters before now, MMA was kind of like, this is my hobby. This is what I do.
Exactly.
It wasn't their job.
Right.
But now because of RIZIN and some like rising opportunities, sponsorships are getting bigger. More and more fans are coming to events. More and more fighters, I think, are going to be able to start training full time, and that'll lead to a nice, more developed fighters emerging in the future.
I can tell you this right now. Officially, I'll do this on the record. Except the big names like a Toyo Tire or Monster Energy or whatever. RIZIN sponsors that sponsors RIZIN fighters. The prices are very, very good. Much better than what we could see in the States or anything like that. You'd be surprised. So, yes, I know fighters are making good money from sponsorship.
Right. And, I mean, just because we interviewed Sudario Tsuyoshi recently, I know, and I've read articles, through the sponsorship, she's able to get, like, daycare and kindergarten stuff like that. So she's actually able to go train.
Right.
So the sponsorship money does seem to be making a big difference.
Big difference. And, I can do this on the record that I'm almost ready to start rejecting sponsor offers from sponsors for Naoki because his shorts are full.
Interesting.
Yeah, and just prices going up and up, and it comes to the point where the old sponsors we did the deal already are paying much less than the new sponsor. So we have to try to do something about that. But again, the deal is deal. But yeah, so I kind of right now sponsorship much better in RIZIN.
Well, go to a deep show. I mean, some of these young guys, they go out there and this is gonna make a very deep industry reference, but their shorts look like RIZIN fighters.
Right.
When RIZIN kickboxers come out, they look like they have 100 sponsors on their shorts. And
there's one thing about kickboxing in Japan, because kickboxing in Japan, they gave up on making money on the fight purse. Because the promotion is so goddamn.
They all wear like the coat that has all the sponsors down it.
They have this wide network of selling tickets or local sponsors to make sure they can make good money. They're not relying on the fight purse at all.
Well, that's what's kind of funny, because when you follow the fighters on social media, when Momoko was doing the fight beforehand, it was like all of a sudden you saw her making the rounds, going to all these restaurants and taking pictures with people and handing out posters. And a lot of these fighters that have long careers have developed giant. I mean, the best example is Koji. Koji's dad has books this big.
Oh, I know.
Filled with names. I'm sorry, filled with names. These are the people that buy our tickets, and it's we are our own business. We make our own money. We don't take the fight money.
You know what? I mean, I remember. You remember Satoko Shinashi? She was known for selling so many tickets, hundreds of tickets, right? But she has so many sponsors. I remember every time she writes a thank you card to each sponsors or each person who bought a ticket, and each postcard she personally wrote the calligraphy and everything else. Yeah. It's one of a kind, and that kind of care, establishes a long-term relationship.
It's funny that you say that, because I interviewed her 10 years ago, and I thought she was a genius, because I didn't know about any of that. And I met with her, and she makes her own postcards. And it's usually a pretty they're all crazy. One of them, she had a giant Yakuza tattoo holding a samurai sword. Right. And she keeps the addresses and the names of everyone that buys her tickets. And so when a show's coming up, she would send everybody a postcard and be like, hey, thank you for always supporting me. Just so you know, I have a fight coming up in a month. Here's the details. I'd love it if you came to my fight. If you want a ticket, please contact me. I'll sell you a ticket. And Satoko Shinashi must have just been a gold mine.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of fighters, like Panchan Reina, I know, sold a ton of tickets on her own. But Satoko Shinashi was going above and beyond to develop these kinds of relationships.
Yes.
And I think Sakura was doing something similar, where Sakura had a giant fan base, but then she went kind of crazy. So I don't know if we're going to see her again.
Oh, I know, right? So some fighters, except kickboxing in Japan, they're very good at that.
Yeah. Well, they realize they're smart. They realize that, why am I getting fights for this promoter? Why am I getting attention? It's because I sell tickets.
Exactly, right. And the point is, forget the fight purse. They keep their ticket selling money, and they say we will balance it out. Yeah. They don't even see money from the promotion.
So this is unrelated, but we've already spoken about them briefly. So One Championship. Did you see these exchanges or the comments? It's kind of older, but from RIZIN and Shinya Aoki.
Well, what were they talking about? I think.
Okay, so I think this happened after Itsuki's last fight in the promotion, so back in September. But I only remember it because on YouTube, Abima has a Kakutogi channel, an MMA, a fight combat sports channel on YouTube, and they make awesome content. And they recently uploaded a video of Itsuki training with Aoki and talking about how strict he is and everything. And in the clip, they show Aoki is the worst / best commentator of all time. Because when he commentates for ONE FC, he says whatever comes to his head, has no filter. And when he was commentating Itsuki fight, he was just openly coaching.
Right, he was criticizing. Right, yeah, I remember that. Right, and Instagram, the RIZIN talked back. Right.
Yeah, and so during his commentary, RIZIN's giving Itsuki this advice, and Aoki's in the commentary booth no, don't do that. That's terrible advice. He's just saying essentially criticizing RIZIN as giving what he said was terrible advice, because Itsuki would do something and he would say oh, good job, keep doing that. And Aoki would be no, don't do that. You should be doing something else. Or
I think Itsuki and Ase broke up. Did they? No?
Well, I think they might not have broken up. There might have been a rumor. It looks like they're still together. And then RIZIN wrote this crazy Instagram post.
Right, he did.
About how he'd never forgive and all this stuff. And then Aoki, always being Aoki, had to poke him and be like, "What did I do to upset you?" But the whole thing, I'm just listening to it, and I'm just like, RIZIN has already kind of been criticized for his commentary, for his cornerman work in the past, especially with the Miyu Yamamoto fight, where people were like, "Who are you to give advice on this situation?
You shouldn't be in that corner, period, at this point."
Yeah. And all I could think was, if you weren't her boyfriend and Itsuki's only allowed to bring one fighter as her second, I would have brought Miyu.
Or he should bring a proper coach. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Why not bring a boyfriend who has like almost no experience raising a MMA fighter?
She has a relationship with Aoki. Have him do it. I mean, Aoki, and it's funny because they got in that fight and she still trains with Aoki. And when you watch the video, say what you want about Aoki. Aoki, you can call him an asshole. You can call him a crazy guy. He's done some weird stuff, but he knows MMA and he's a good trainer. And so I would listen to what he says about being a second over or seventh. But I thought it was kind of a funny beef because it was essentially some guy that has no idea what he's talking about, talking to someone who's been doing it for close to 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny, right?
Have you listened to his commentary?
Not really, because it's hard to listen to, right? He has that
his voice, yeah. But I just remember, I think during the Ritu Fogat and Mingbo fight, he was just like, One Championship must not know what he's saying or not care, because he was like, both these fighters are so low quality, like they don't know what they're doing. This is just like a really sloppy fight. He's just like complaining the whole time.
Maybe that's part of his character, but that's good that he says that, though. You know?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so at the end, let's talk about this last topic of the day, which you mentioned, which is Sudario Tsuyoshi's younger brother, who got into trouble with the sumo world again. I shouldn't say again, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did they found him smoking marijuana?
I think they found marijuana in his house. So he's out of sumo, like no longer allowed to be in sumo.
All right.
Is he his younger brother or is
MMA?
He's his twin. They're twin brothers.
Oh, it's a twin brothers. Oh.
Yes.
You know what? If he's interested in MMA, Sakakibara will sign him. Guaranteed.
Well, I saw that he commented.
Unless he's like a real, shithead, you know?
When they asked him about it, I thought he said something to the effect of, "I want to try to be the Yokozuna in the big square of the next phase of my life." And people are like, "Square? The ring is a square size." So people are wondering, because what's he going to do? I mean, he's the same situation as Sudario. It's like, you didn't make any money in sumo, so you have to make some money. And what's the easiest way to make money? Oh, you happen to be the identical twin of a popular fighter now? Well, this just sounds too good to be true. I mean, this is the kind of thing Sudario dreams about. Not Sudario, Sakakibara. This is the type of thing that Sakakibara dreams about, is twin heavyweights.
Yeah, I mean, he's young then, if it's a twin brother, and if he has no job and he's outside the sumo, then I think it's almost guaranteed he's coming into RIZIN then. And again, they could be a good talent for the pay-per-view shows.
They'd be crazy to not at least try it out, like to give him some type of fight and see what happens.
I mean, they can bring in that guy's Shumetov brothers from Russia. I know they can fight them, you know?
No. Literally give him the same opponents. Put him on the same track as Sudario and compare the results.
That would be kind of interesting too, right? I mean,
make it like a science experiment.
Exactly, right. You know, I mean, do they really look alike? I mean,
yeah, they do.
Well, they can do the tag team match too, and then you can switch it.
I think the brother might still be fat, but
right. You go get into shape, right?
But here's what you do: you put him with a different coach. You turn this into an experiment to see who can create the best fighter of all time. Like if Ensign has a rival of some kind, you like Gerard Gordeau or somebody, you find some guy to start training Sudario's brother, and we just see how weird this can get.
That is true, right? But I mean, so I think it's more than likely he will come into MMA then.
I think he's got to come into it in some way.
Has to, right? I mean, so that maybe
he's not going to go work at a supermarket. Like, what's he going to
do? So he could be one of the guys in New Year's Eve. Who knows?
Yeah,
you know, because I know New Year's Eve cars are pretty much filling up. You know.
Plus, I mean, Sudario probably does need training partners, and He's a fellow heavyweight. Sudario looked really good in his last fight. I know his opponent was essentially a newbie guy making his debut.
You know, but again, it's hard to tell with a guy like that. And
but I will say,
skill. Yeah,
it was at least nice to see Sudario fight someone who's young, who is an actual heavyweight, and isn't like a.
You can tell the Sudario start working on boxing. At least you can tell. But
and like
that's
the opponent,
yeah.
Saint looked like he was like strong, could move. He wasn't like a crippled 50-year-old pro wrestler who has no athletic ability.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see if more of these, because I think the Okinawa show also has a military guy fighting on it.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't be surprised.
So I'm wondering if RIZIN is like so desperate to find foreigners, they're going to start digging through the barracks to find like tough guys.
Well, especially for the Okinawa show, why not? Because the military base they'll sell a lot of tickets there.
Sell some tickets, yeah.
Yeah, it only makes sense. And I think it's 50%, right? And capacity allowed, so it's like 5,000.
I think Okinawa, I think coronavirus is still somewhat the worst. Okinawa is one of the worst spots. But in Tokyo area, the numbers are very low.
Yeah, but who knows how many they tested too. I don't believe that whole number at all.
I don't believe the low number either, because I just think people aren't going to the hospital.
No, exactly. That's all it is. That's all. Right. Anyway, so we get a couple questions, so maybe we can answer these. Let's see. Why big Japanese brands don't partner with MMA kickboxing promotion? The only exception is maybe side games, but there's lots of companies. Most of the major
big Japanese brands. Is he like talking like Toyota or something?
Yeah, exactly. They would never sponsor MMA because they still think it's associated with the Yakuza and underground world. And I hate to say this, but some of the gyms still do, you know?
Well, especially since the big Pride fallout was all related.
I know. They have that image. It's so hard to get rid of, you know? And I hate to say this, but there are a lot of fighters who shows up with the tattoos. And again, I don't care about tattoos, but still, you know, major corporations, they prefer not to work with somebody with tattoos, you know? Tattoo is a sign of Yakuza, right, in Japan. You can't even go into the hot springs. You can't go into sauna, you know?
Yeah, most of these places are run by extremely conservative old people.
Yes, that too. Right. It's really difficult. So that's why, in a way, like they have the Plus Weed, right? Like the new CBD company, and I think traditionally pachinko makers been sponsoring lots of Japanese MMA shows, and they're big corporations.
What are pachinko corporations usually associated with?
Like
aren't there a bunch of like? Isn't there like a large organized crime element to pachinko as well?
Well, you know, I don't get into that, but the feels, you know.
Doesn't Emi Fujino's family have like a pachinko parlor or something?
Big pachinko parlor chain in the same town where Naoki and Asakura brothers are from, in Toyohashi.
Something in the water up there.
Yeah, I think so too, you know. So yeah, and unfortunately, it's really still very difficult, you know. Now, next question. Naoki has the possibility of fighting twice on New Year's Eve. He should have different shorts for each fight, so twice the sponsors. You know, it's not that easy because we have a different deal for different sponsors. And I did add, like, if you get to the final, they have to pay extra, you know? And you can't dump all these long-time sponsors just because, you're not paying me extra 50%, so I'm not going to give you a spot. Nah, I can't.
You'd burn so many bridges.
So many bridges if you do that. And many of this Naoki's sponsorship is actually 3 different packages I always offer. Some sponsor per fight only basis, but some sponsors like yearly, and some sponsors agree to pick up certain tab bills for the whole year, kind of stuff. So, you know, like for example, one company is paying all his rent and that type of stuff. So you can't say, well, if you're not paying extra, I'm not going to give you this spot because it's the final. It's the biggest spot on New Year's Eve, right? So you can't dump a long-time sponsor at that point. So yes, good idea, but you know, can't do that. Yeah. Okay. Taki Genji will fight next Plus Weed sponsor, right? You know,
that'd be hilarious if they made him like the spokesman of the entire weed brand.
You know what? I hate to tell you this, but now there's a big debate going on. Says, CBD is not marijuana, right? I mean, I think people have to understand that CBD in Japan is different from CBD here.
Well, also, it's kind of funny because I've noticed as soon as like UFC athletes start doing supplements, like CBD or anything like that, all of a sudden Japanese athletes start asking about those supplements.
CBD, right? I know.
all those people had CBD sponsorships, so now all these Japanese athletes want CBD.
I mean, do you use CBD?
No, I mean, I don't.
I don't feel.
I'm more of the opinion that I'm pessimistic, and I think it's like the new snake oil of our time.
Right. I
where
mean,
no matter what you have, this will fix it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just don't tend to believe in super drugs.
Right. Now, here, next one. Sudario was saying that he doesn't welcome his brother. He disliked doing same sports with his brother, but they did the same sports. Sumo.
I saw that comment that he
did. Okay.
He said those things, but that's cool if Sudario says that. But I imagine his brother, who no longer has a job, would like to make some money as well.
Of course, and I mean, except pro wrestling or became a TV talent, I think he cannot be the TV talent because he just got kicked out of marijuana.
So. If the comments like that, if we're building towards a Sudario versus his twin brothers showdown, I am even more into this.
But that's going to be very interesting, right? I mean, I'm telling you right now that RIZIN has to create all this, not just the competition, because UFC gets the best fighters anyway, so you can't really compete on that ground, Right. So to create a different brand, I think they're doing the right thing.
Now, do you think if Sudario, since his brother is an identical twin, do you think that you risk oversaturating the market by having Sudario and his brother fight?
Well, I don't know how they're going to do this one, but I always say, like, even Mikuru and Kai, they could always use like a Hickson and Hoist Gracie tactics.
Yeah, fight in different promotions.
Right. Or one can be sort of like a legendary untouched that does only big money fights. One goes out and prove,
Interesting.
Superiority, kind of whatever,
Yeah, so it's funny that Sudario would say that because they're both in the exact same. So they both got kicked out of sumo for different reasons. And so I just don't see there's no way his brother can do anything else sports related except this. No other sport would have him.
Here's another reason to answer Daniel that it's hard to get a mainstream sponsor because RIZIN will pick up all these guys who gets kicked out of a national
RIZIN
sports.
has Bobby Ologun, it has the Ame Talk guy, it has all these people.
Right. So but again, that's attracting the crowd there, and that's attracting the pay-per-view. So, so we'll see. I think it's going to be very interesting next year.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of what that movie Moneyball, where they look at these guys and they're like, "Oh, you committed this felony, but you have a lot of name recognition. We could pay you money, not what you would have wanted to be paid a year ago, but we can pay you some money and milk some last juice out of your career before you're done."
Yeah, exactly. So that's the point, because right now it's not like if you're good and if you keep beating everybody, you make best money, right?
Right.
That's not how it works at this point, Yeah, it's always been like that to a certain degree, but right now I think I won't name names here, but some fighters obviously is not that good as making pretty good money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, but the key example of that would be like Satoshi has made it very clear that he likes fighting in RIZIN because he's making more money in RIZIN than he would anywhere else. He's probably getting better results in RIZIN than he would anywhere else.
You know what? I have to agree with him 100%. I'm not going to name, I can't, but I'm telling you right now, as we all know how much entry-level UFC fighter makes, and if you lose a couple of fights and get released, the money you're going to make is much smaller than the money you're making in RIZIN.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you have a right to choose your own career. You're a professional, so why not go to the place that pays you the best?
Okay, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
What is it kind of like Kayla Harrison in the PFL? I'm like, if you're gonna make $1 million a year, why not just stay there forever?
Right now, right? I got God, you mentioned that even Amanda Nunes too. Right now, I think being in the women's 145 division may be the easiest way to make money if you have that top athlete's quality. I mean, you're fighting a girl who's like 1-0. Like 2-0, like 3-0 kind of thing, Well,
it's just like, why would she ever agree to sign with Bellator or the UFC? It's like, I'm making $1 million a year,
right?
Just doing what I'm doing. I'm in a great spot.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it'd be stupid to sign for even 100, right?
Exactly.
I mean, oh my God, but man, like I'm telling this officially, I would love to announce all the combat sports athletes in Japan that if you think you can compete at 145 women MMA, do it. Really do it. If you're a top judo girl, I'm telling you, don't you think so?
Yeah.
The money made right there,
It's funny too, because it's split. the division that barely exists is strictly split across 3 promotions. So it's
right. And they each have like 2 fighters each on each division, right? Literally.
If you don't think you can beat Amanda Nunes, just go to Bellator or RIZIN, not RIZIN, PFL, and become a champion.
Any girls fighting between 60 to 70 amateur, please contact me. I will make sure something will happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, I should start scouting girls on that.
Start showing up at like high school wrestling meets. Like, so what are you doing?
But I'm telling you right now, like as you know, like amateur wrestling or judo or even kickboxing in Japan is full of talent. Full of them, yeah. And there are girls at that weight class who could be pretty good. So
yeah, and it's not that weight class, but I mean, Deep Jewels, they signed a world caliber level wrestler.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm very excited for her debut this December. And with you got to think this is because of RIZIN. RIZIN has created brand recognition on TV, and fighters like Murata Kaneko,
right,
and Kana Watanabe have both found success.
Right.
Now Ota one has found success. So now more, and with the Olympics Olympics are over. Now the next Olympics are 4 years away.
Right.
So a lot of these fighters are like, can I make it that long? Or should I just switch over to MMA and start making some money?
I'm telling you, wrestlers, please come, right? I mean, 145 women. Maybe that's the fastest route to get to the UFC title fight.
What do you think about Shuto Watanabe calling out Ota?
I don't know. Well, but Shuto Watanabe, I got to give him credit. I'm telling you, when he got signed to RIZIN, many fighters say he's not that good, blah, blah, blah. But except that nowhere, he's been beating everybody. Yeah. He has established himself and he created his own market, right?
He's created his own brand.
Yeah, own brand.
Popular, yeah.
Right. Now wants to fight Ota. It's going to be interesting because right now Ota is still a much better wrestler, but it's not like he's fully developed MMA fighter. So maybe a couple of years down the road, maybe it's going to be hard. Just the fact that Ota is much physically probably better. But right now, Shuto still could submit him, right?
Well, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you're going to call out Ota, now is the time to do it because he's only going to get better.
Before he gets better, right? Yeah, just
before he learns how to punch.
Exactly. And he learns how to defend submissions, or to avoid give up his back, that kind of stuff,
So what makes me think is that Watanabe watched the last Ota fight and was like, I could have choked him out right here. I could have choked him out right here.
Right, exactly.
All I was thinking the entire time. But I thought it was interesting because I just assumed that since Shuto Watanabe and Imanari were going to fight as alternates, so I assumed that was what's going to happen, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But I would welcome Shuto fighting Ota. Was also interesting is one thing that my friends all like about Watanabe is he always talks about his girlfriend in his post fight.
Yeah, I know.
But you got to think, like, in a world where Nisei isn't rising because she's popular in Okinawa. That makes sense. Her opponent, Aida Koga, I think this will be her 3rd fight.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why is she getting? She's from Osaka, I believe. So it makes sense that, but Hikaru Aono is a very much more established fighter than Nisei.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I don't know why he wouldn't. And she was also a very high-level wrestler. She wrestled against Miyu Yamamoto and wrestled on the world wrestling scene. So I was just wondering, why wouldn't you bring her? It's like the guy making the RIZIN confession videos isn't talking to the guy that's the matchmaker.
No, they talk. I know they do. Yeah, they have a big matchmaking meeting every week. So
it's just like Shuto Watanabe is hot right now. Why would you not bring his girlfriend in at this timing?
No, I mean, I wish we can explain, but there's always so many reasons. I'm telling you, there's a limited spot on each shows, and there's a matchmaking meeting that everybody has their own agenda.
Well, my theory is that they don't want Nisei to get blown out on an Okinawa show.
Right.
So they're giving her a young fighter. That way, if she loses, it's not like a devastating loss. That's my theory.
Right. But at the same time, right now, I think they got to start thinking about at least use them twice. Not like use them once and cut them off because they have a lot of shows now.
Well, that's what I was hoping. That's what I was worried about going into the Kana Asakura Oshima fight was just that if Oshima loses this, there's a chance that she just goes that Deep Jewels route where they just never use her again. So I was hoping that it'd be competitive fights, they'd use her again, and I didn't. I mean, she won, so I mean, I hoped they use her again. I mean, it's good to see that Ohara is finally coming back to RIZIN, because I thought that nobody who fights for RIZIN wins and then doesn't get the call back.
But I think it's partly because of the Deep situation too. I think Deep needs to be like, they need to function too. You can't just kind of.
He has been very active in Deep, and Deep can't give all of their talent to RIZIN. I understand that.
Right. But the psyche is heavily involved in their matchmaking too, obviously. So, I mean, it's something they have to balance it out,
Right. And I mean, we said it 100 times. I think Stuart Fulton said it too. A lot of these RIZIN cards are just Deep versus Pancrase.
Right. It is.
But I think Deep and Pancrase get a lot of benefits from it. And I think Shuto's kind of stupid for not taking part.
I think they want to go their own route with Abema and One Championship. We'll see.
Yeah, which could be a long-term strategy. We'll see how it goes.
Right. So who knows?
We'll see how much money can One Championship lose before something happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm really hoping they'll do well next year, because it's better for the other fighters. It's really our clients been sitting on deck for so many months. I don't know what to tell them.
I make fun of One Championship a lot, but they do pay fighters. They do pay some other fighters well, and they do a very good job of promoting their fighters.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. Yeah,
but I do have to say that their new YouTube tactic of putting on like the thumbnail image for the women's fights is like the girls in bikinis.
Oh, they do? Like, I missed that. Yeah.
Oh, they're totally trying to like do the sex sells to get views on these fights, and it looks incredibly weird.
Well, I heard, I can't get into details, but One Championship has recently hired some new personnel coming in from known organization in the States. It's from maybe creating a new storyline kind of stuff,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Which I'll tell you about it after the podcast. I'm sorry to the listeners,
Yeah.
But yeah,
have you heard anything about how is their TNT deal going?
Team what?
Aren't they on TNT?
TNT. Well, I mean, I think they have to renegotiate for the deal next year. But at the same time, here in the PFL, their deal with ESPN is over at the end of this year too. So they're also talking to TNT too.
Yeah.
So who knows?
That's interesting, because I mean, One Championship, because they're in Singapore, has been hit so hard by the pandemic.
Oh, I know. I feel bad. I mean, the government's so strict, and you can't fight the government.
The only promotion that I think has been damaged more is Road FC. Because Road FC used to be like a legitimate promotion,
right? Yeah.
It's like, do they even exist anymore? Like, what
exactly?
the hell
I feel like they kind of disappeared, right? Yeah.
Right. So, be interesting to see what happens.
But let's see. I mean, I hope everybody will come back to normal soon. Yeah. So we can see more exciting matchups too, right?
Yeah. Well, because I was thinking about Road FC the other day. Road FC, the Asakura brothers fought there.
Right.
Ham Sohei fought there.
I mean, I think Kai lost, right?
That's just like Road FC had its heyday. I'd like to see it come back.
It did. Right. All right. I think we did enough for today.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we'll come back in 2 weeks again.
Perfect.
All right. And have a nice day, Charlie. And
bye
to everybody. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you then.
All right. Bye-bye.